How African Americans see their ancestors and identity has changed a lot. For a long time, people believed that all African Americans were descendants of African slaves brought to the U.S. through the transatlantic slave trade. They were thought to be outsiders from Africa, and their only identity was being slaves. But now, a hidden part of history suggests that African Americans' ancestors were actually native to America. Unlike the majority of white people in the U.S. today, who come from Europe, these native people were the real first inhabitants of the land. So what proof is there that African Americans might have Native American roots? In this video, we'll look into this question. The Black History Archives. Before European settlers arrived in the Americas, the land was already home to many native tribes, each with its own culture, language, and physical traits. What many people don't know is that several of these tribes had dark skin and features that looked similar to those of African people. Tribes like the Yamasee, Choctaw, and groups from the Caribbean and South America were known for having dark skin, curly hair, and broad faces. These physical traits made European settlers assume that these tribes came from Africa, even though they were actually native to the Americas. As time passed, this misunderstanding led settlers to wrongly group these dark-skinned native tribes with Africans, which erased their true identity as indigenous people. European explorers and settlers wrote about their observations of Native Americans, and some of them, like explorer James Adair, even compared the skin tone of some tribes to the Moors of Africa in his book, The History of the American Indians in 1775. However, their accounts were often influenced by racial bias, and they felt the need to categorize people based on skin color, which was a common practice among Europeans at the time. The need to create strict racial categories led to these dark-skinned native tribes being labeled as black, further erasing their unique heritage and identity. Today, as we learn more about the past, we realize that this simple categorization does not reflect the truth about these tribes. The existence of these dark-skinned tribes challenges the racial divisions that European settlers tried to impose on the Americas, showing that race and skin color were used in ways that distorted the true history and culture of native peoples. This supported the false idea that all dark-skinned people in America came from Africa, even though they were actually indigenous to the land. This erasure of their true identity helped to strengthen the idea that dark-skinned people were inferior and justified the practices of slavery and the theft of native lands. This distortion of history served several purposes for the European settlers. By labeling dark-skinned Native Americans as African slaves, they reinforced the idea that certain races were inferior. This not only justified the brutal system of slavery, but also helped European settlers take Native American lands. The categorization of these people as slaves made it easier for settlers to exploit them, both through forced labor and the appropriation of their lands, without recognizing their original native heritage. Interestingly, this practice of enslavement and cultural erasure wasn't only happening in the English colonies. Spanish colonizers were also responsible for enslaving many Native Americans, especially in the Caribbean and South America. These regions had a large number of dark-skinned indigenous groups, and the Spanish were just as involved in erasing their true identity and exploiting them for labor. In his book, The Other Slavery, The Uncovered Story of Indian Enslavement in America, historian Andrés Reséndez explores the lesser-known history of Native American enslavement. He reveals that the forced labor of Native Americans was common and significantly contributed to the growth of the colonial economy in the Americas. While both African slaves and Native American tribes experienced enslavement, their shared struggle for freedom created a bond between these two groups. Over time, this shared experience led to the intermarriage of African slaves and Native Americans. These unions created children with both African and Native American heritages, further blending the two cultures. However, it's crucial to understand that the ancestry of African Americans today is not solely based on the idea that black native tribes simply married Africans. The children of these interracial marriages carried a mix of both African and Native American backgrounds, making the ancestry complex. Additionally, when black native tribes married within their own communities, their children maintained African features, resulting in darker skin and physical traits similar to Africans. Therefore, contemporary African Americans are likely to have both Native American and African roots. In some cases, they may even have more Native American ancestry than African, depending on their family history. The reclassification of mixed-race individuals as part of the broader racial system was not accidental. This change was deliberately crafted as part of a larger government strategy to take control of Native American lands and resources. One of the key policies used to facilitate this land grab was the Dawes Act of 1887, also known as the General Allotment Act. The act aimed to break up communal Native American lands into individual plots, with the goal of forcing Native Americans to adopt European American ways of living. This policy was a direct attempt to undermine the traditional communal lifestyle of Native tribes and make it easier for the U.S. government to seize their land. Historian Andres Resendez, in his book The Other Slavery, discusses how Native American slavery was crucial to the colonial economy, alongside African slavery. Both groups faced similar struggles, leading to intermarriage between Native Americans and Africans, creating children with both African and Native American ancestry. However, today's African Americans are not just descendants of these intermarriages, but also have varied backgrounds. Some mixed-race children still had distinct African features, leading to a range of African American identities. The U.S. government used policies like the Dawes Act of 1887 to break up Native American lands and force assimilation, making it harder for mixed-race individuals to prove their Native heritage and access land. By classifying individuals with both African and Native American heritage as African Americans, the U.S. government denied them the land rights that came with tribal membership. This reclassification served two purposes. It reduced the number of people eligible for land allotments, leaving more land for European settlers, and it erased the Native identity of people with African ancestry. As a result, Native tribes lost land because their members had darker skin or were descendants of slaves. The government also used this reclassification to treat Black Native tribes as Africans ineligible for land. The Dawes Act allowed the government to sell unused Native lands to settlers. This erasure of Native heritage led many people to identify only with their African roots, and as a result, many African Americans today are unaware of their Native American ancestry, even though many likely have such heritage. This loss of cultural identity not only affected personal self-perception, but also contributed to the broader historical amnesia regarding the complex interrelations between African and Native American communities. The physical traits of African Americans today reflect their diverse ancestral backgrounds. Some show features typically linked to African heritage, like darker skin and tightly coiled hair, while others have traits associated with Native American ancestry, such as high cheekbones, straight hair, and certain skin tones. These physical markers serve as reminders of their native roots, even though much of that history has been erased. Many African Americans are not just of mixed heritage but are descendants of Black Aborigines, and their physical features highlight this. The erasure of Native American heritage from the African American community has had deep cultural effects, disrupting Native traditions, languages, and connections that once existed between African and Native American people. This cultural disruption has contributed to the marginalization of Native American history within African American communities and has hindered efforts to reclaim and celebrate this aspect of their heritage. The ongoing struggle to acknowledge and honor the Native American roots of many African Americans is part of a broader movement to recognize and rectify historical injustices and to celebrate the rich, multifaceted identities of African American individuals. I think it's likely that many African Americans today do have Native American ancestors, though the exact extent of this varies from person to person. History has shown that African and Native American communities often intermingled, especially during the colonial period and the era of slavery. The erasure of this heritage, however, has made it difficult for many African Americans to fully recognize or embrace these connections. It's fascinating to think about how African Americans might have deeper roots in America than many white Americans, given that they are often descendants of both enslaved Africans and Native Americans who were here long before European settlers arrived. As for my own family history, I don't have personal stories passed down, but it's always interesting to hear about the connections others have to their ancestors. What do you think about this idea? Have you or people you know explored any Native American heritage within your own families? If you'd like to see more videos like this, please support us by subscribing to the We the World and clicking the bell icon. Your support helps us create more valuable content for you.